From the Highlands to the coast, we'll bring you the rivalries, the traditions, the legendary coaches, and tomorrow's superstars forging their path to greatness. You're watching CarolinaPreps.com.
Get off up, Lonnie! Get off up! Hold it!
All right, I guess it's Thursday evening, August 7th, 2025. Andy, the season's almost here. Tomorrow night, this time, I will be at Spangler Stadium at Gardner-Webb for the Cleveland County Jamboree. So I guess football's finally here. Thank God.
Yeah. And I left. I was down at Sherrall and been to Huff today and Providence, and man, Sherrall's actually scrimmaging tonight. So I mean, the South Carolina schools are getting it in too already, and as well as the North Carolina schools. So I mean, football's here, brother.
Well, it certainly is. And hey, welcome here, Carolina Preps, once again inside the headset. Chris Hughes, my man Andy, Rodden, Coach Rodden. We're going to bring the coach right on because, it's season time. I just mentioned we got jamborees and practice and everything, and I don't want to waste his time, but I do want to thank Coach Cort Radford, Asheville High School, coming on to talk some football with us tonight. Coach, thanks for joining me and Andy. Talk some football. How's things going up there in Buncombe County? How's everything with you and your guys? I have not talked to you personally since – I know we've texted a little bit, but since the storms last year, and before we even talk about football, how's your community doing and your kids and all the guys in your program? Are they still kind of getting better from the storms that happened last fall?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate all you guys do for high school football in the state. The hurricane last year, that was wild. That was a tough time. And it's going to be a while before we completely recover from that. A lot of people, lost their homes. Where I live out there, my bridge was completely washed out. And a lot of people had family members. A lot of people died, unfortunately during this thing. So it's going to take time. And, we're a big tourism area up here in West North Carolina, and it's going to take time for all that stuff to kind of come back. I thought it was big for us to find a way to get back on the football field last year, to try to find a way, even though we didn't have power, even though we didn't have water, even though we weren't in school. Just trying to find a way to get our kids back and kind of give them a sense of normalcy and try to give the community something to rally around. But it was tough. It was hard times. And, I think, are we coming back from it? Yeah. But is there still effects from it? There's no doubt.
Yeah. And Andy, I'll let you jump in here in just a moment. But, once the season, you finally did get back. And I know this is last year, but still, I think it's a big story for this year. Just the fact that you guys are still able to get football and, just the normalcy. I'll use your words, and other coaches have said that too, just to get the young men, the players, the students, everybody, not just football. I mean, this is community-wide. This is so much further reaching than football. But just the fact to finally – have almost a year since that time to just get back to normal and get back to your lives. I think it's still something that probably in some way, shape, or form probably impacts you every day.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt it does. And something you still think about all the time. I think one of the hardest things about it, maybe some people outside this area don't realize, there was a lot of devastation. There was a lot of stuff, and that all was terrible. And one of the hardest parts about it is there was no communication. You couldn't communicate. There's no way to check in on kids. You couldn't get anywhere. I've always heard you don't drive over down power lines. We drove over them for 2 months. And wow. That's just what it was. And like I said, cell phones didn't work. Luckily where we live, out in the middle of nowhere, we already had Starlink internet. But if you didn't have Starlink, then you had no internet, no power. The cell towers were down. There was no way to communicate. And I think that was part of the issue is you're trying to check in on people and stuff like that happens. And I think that was a big reason why, people outside West North Carolina at first didn't really realize how bad the devastation was because it couldn't be communicated. And so I remember one of the hardest parts was I decided to get my family out, and we had to, our road was washed out. My dad dropped off his car. We went down, I took my 3 kids. We had to cross a creek on a painting ladder to kind of get out to a different road where we could get out of town. And we're leaving on that Sunday trying to, because I got 3 kids. They get hurt every day. Like we can't, if they fall and bust their head at the house, we can't get them to the hospital. So we took them down to Asheboro, where she's from. But when we're leaving, the crazy thing was there was no one coming in. And I just expected just Army trucks, of people coming in, and it's just people didn't know yet, And then as it progressed for the next few weeks, I mean, we got so many resources and so many schools out there reached out to lend a helping hand, and it was really powerful, because it's hard to, ask for help, especially a West North Carolina guy. We'll handle our business.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to ask for help, but at that point we needed it, and there were some great people that stepped up and helped us.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that. I spent a good portion of my life. I mean, I won't say a good portion, but at least 5 years up there in Western North Carolina. So and at Western Carolina, and playing football, and I just seen the devastation. So I know a lot of my buddies, up in that area, and same thing you said, Cort. Just hard to get communication, hard to find out things about family members, stuff like that. And I went up twice with my church, and just took supplies, took water. I mean, just stuff like that. And, that's what I tell people. It was literally like a war zone. I mean, that's what it reminded me of. And not that I've ever been in war, but I've seen pictures. So my prayers are still with you, community, with the people of Western North Carolina, because, a little bit of my heart has been there, and a little bit of my heart is going there Saturday. My daughter. So, yeah, she's going to Western. We move her on Saturday. Yeah.
Man. Well, hey, it's good to still, share these stories and just to keep those of us maybe down here in the flatlands, as they call it up your way, keep you guys still in our thoughts moving forward, because, I know the life's kind of gotten back to normal, but to some people it hasn't. So, it's good for us to just always remember that. But let's shift our focus, Coach Radford, to just talk about your team. Obviously scrimmages kick off tomorrow. The season kicks off in a little over, I guess, 2 weeks, now, which is a good thing. I'm glad that we kind of got that extra buffer week. They've kind of built some more time in there, because I feel like the teams need that. But tell me how you feel about your team. On paper, I know you're talented. A lot of people talk about your program, and I feel like you guys are going to be good, but you're there with them every day. You're the one practicing with them, working out with them. How you feel about this group of guys?
Well, I'll start by saying we graduated a very, very good senior class last year. I hate that the hurricane came in and kind of messed up the momentum we were building, and I didn't really feel like I got to see the fullness of what that team could become. But we graduated a very good senior class. Now, we got some good seniors coming back, but with our team this year, when I say we're young, people say it all the time, we're young. No, we're young. I mean, we scrimmage at Brevard tomorrow. We're starting 4 freshmen on varsity defense, just on the defensive side. And you're talking about, these are 14-year-olds. Now, are they incredibly talented? Yes, they are. But at the same point, they're 14. The group we have this year is probably one of the most talented groups that we've had. They're just freshmen and sophomores. They're young, and they're having to play up. Because they are talented, and we have size up front. We're as big as we've been up front, which you have to lean on in mountain football. When you go down the mountain, even at Asheville, where we have a lot of speed, Charlotte's got more. They just do. And so when you get down the mountain, you got to be willing to play mountain football. And to play mountain football, it helps when you have a bunch of guys that look like Andy out there on the offensive line. That normally helps. So, and that's our thing for this year. Do I think we're talented? Yes. Do I think we could be very good? Yes. They're going to have to grow up in a hurry. We got a tough non-conference schedule, and these kids played middle school football last year. Now with that being said, I don't want to say that we don't have some key seniors, because we do. We got some key seniors: Dylan Bienvenu, Kendrick Robbs, Oliver Preacher, Javion Howard, just to name a few, that are going to have to be dudes. And I told them that we expect leadership out of seniors every year. That's no different in any program in the state or in the nation. But when you're a senior leading a bunch of juniors, it's different than when you're a senior leading a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. So their leadership is paramount to our success.
Great. Hey, you mentioned one thing, and I do want to touch on it. You mentioned your tough schedule, and you guys, you really were aggressive, and I think that's good. I think it's good to be aggressive in scheduling in this day and age, especially with the the way they use the max preps rating. I'm not a big fan, but it is what it is. They use it, so you got to make sure that you're fitting into that equation to get the best possible playoff positioning you can. But I feel like you're improving your team. I'm looking at it right now. East Rutherford on the 22nd. That's no pushover. Coach Russ has done a phenomenal job in how he has rebuilt that program. At Dobbins Bennett, I know they're a tough team. I don't know a lot about them, being up there in Tennessee, but I do know watching, when they've played Asheville over the years, I know it's a tough team. Obviously going on the road to Crest, we know about them. And then, in the 100-some-year history of Asheville High School, playing Asheville School, I think that's an interesting game. I'm almost certain y'all have never played them. And 15, 20 years ago, I'd have said there's no way in the world Asheville High School would have ever played Asheville School. But lo and behold, they've turned themselves into quite the power when it comes to the private school ranks. I think that's an interesting game, Coach.
It is. Like I said, East Rutherford, good football team. They made it beat Reedsville last year, and they returned everybody. All their skill players are back. That's a tough team. Dobbins Bennett. If you've never been to a game at Dobbins Bennett, it's a bucket list type deal. It's what Friday night, high school football should be. Town shuts down. Huge stadium. It's the largest school in Tennessee. It's the largest band in the nation. It's a production. Halftime is like 25 minutes long. It's exact. When they come out, the lights go out. And they start the big jumbotrons going, and they're all doing the Tomahawk Atlanta Braves chop as they're coming out, and it is. Now that is going to be an atmosphere for a bunch of young kids to go into.
I feel like you're trying to sell me on going to that game in week 2.
Hey, I'm serious. I told after I went there the first year, I'll keep them on the schedule for the remainder of my career, just because our kids deserve to play in that atmosphere.
Wow, I'm glad you told me that because I had no idea.
No, our guys our coaches that go up to the box, it's so big they have an elevator that goes up in the box, and they have a lady in there that works the elevator. That's her job on Friday nights. It reminds me, of like App State back in the day when I was there. That's kind of the atmosphere of it. It's awesome. It's unbelievable. Crest is Crest. And I know, like I said, I was in DC there for a couple of years. I know the expectations down there, and I know what they got in the roster. I know how good they are. I'm good friends with Coach Lloyd and, his time at Kings Mountain. And so we know what we're setting up for there. And then, like you said, Asheville School, I don't know if it's ever been done. The one thing that's probably, not considered a lot is that it's not very easy for us to find games up here. Creating a schedule, especially with the conference that we're in, being a 6-team conference, having to find 5 non-conference games is so hard. It's just tough. And so, you look around and you sit there and you do, private schools, are they still kids, this, that, and the other? And my thing was, if they take them, they're going to take them either way. So you might as well play them, and they want to play us because they kind of want to break that mold of, public versus private. And we've played private schools. We played Providence Day, 2 years ago. And it's not something we haven't done before, but Asheville School is 15 minutes down the road, and they've won 2 or 3 state championships in their division in private school. And so I know our kids are excited about that one. And then we also got Watauga non-conference. And that's miserable. My defense coordinator was not very pleased. Coach Jake Cardillo was not very pleased about that one. And no defense coordinator should be pleased about playing Watauga. It's a miserable offense to prepare for.
Yeah, Coach Havoc probably that is definitely one of the more unique. I mean, it's one thing to run a double wing and some triple and some different things, but he definitely has a uniqueness to how he runs it, and they're very effective. And those kids are really good. And I don't think Watauga's got the most talent, but I think they utilize and make the most of every bit they got.
I tell them all the time because we've scrimmaged them for years. I'm good friends with Dustin Curley, their defensive coordinator and AD up there, but they must have the smartest kids in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know how they remember all the the motions, the shifts, the jumps, the format. They line up in so many different things, so many unbalanced. And you can spend all week preparing for the triple option against them, and they get in the game and they're running power read and GH counter out of the gun. And the defensive end comes over to you and is like, do I tackle the dive? And you're like, buddy, it ain't no dive. You better attack the puller right here. And so it's just so much to prepare for, and he's got trick plays out in the book. He onside kicks all the time. So, we have a bye week before him. That's the saving graces. We got a little more time to prepare.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Coach, I do want to kind of ask you a question because you've been in Cleveland County football, and Cleveland County football is, I think, some of the best football in the state with those 4 schools. And what's the biggest difference that you saw from being DC at Crest to to Chase, being the head coach, and the turnaround that you did there to where you are now? Like, what sets those, what sets Asheville, what makes Asheville football other than mountain football? Because I was going to make a comment about that. Like, I tell all these people down here, coaches in Union County, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, like, you get a mountain school in the playoffs, that's a tough draw. I don't care what their record says. You're not used to playing mountain football. But what has been your, what have you seen that's different about Crest to Chase to Asheville?
Well, at Crest, I get there and they'd won like 32 games in a row, back-to-back state championships. And basically, if you're an able-bodied male in Cleveland County, you're expected to play football. That's what is expected. And so, the expectations, the community aspect, they care. We had to have like I can't remember what it was called, a horseshoe club meeting or something like that with the football donors every Wednesday, and we had to put on like film for them and talk about our upcoming opponent and all this stuff. And it was just, it was definitely a Friday Night's Lights, esque situation. And then I get to Chase, that had zero expectations at the time, and I remember, and one of the reasons I took the Chase job is we were at Crest and we were playing Chase and they had some dudes out there. And I remember we weren't playing very good. And I was a little worried. We had a bunch of kids out that game. And I remember one of the staff members at Crest, and I told him, I was like, man, I'm a little worried about this one. They got a few dudes. And he said, the only way you lose is if you can't get the bus to the game. And we get over to Crest, and we're up 7-0 at halftime. And I remember looking over at Chase, and they were kind of looking at us like, will y'all hurry up and beat us so we can go home? And I'm like, you guys are in this thing. And so that was the biggest challenge with getting to Chase, was kind of the mentality aspect of trying to eliminate like a born loser mentality. And at any place I got there with a great staff. And I was the school they cared about football and they wanted to be good. They knew it was important. So they hired football coaches in teaching positions. They helped me. And then, kids that had been leaving and going to Thomas Jefferson and East Rutherford and all these different schools stayed, and so the transfer portal we kind of cut off, and we were able to keep a really good group of kids. And, we go 4-7 the first year, and we had a parade, people were excited. And the next year we won 10 games and, and beat South Point. And it was just, it was an incredible year, and then, I'm from West North Carolina. Like you said, with mountain football, we take a lot of pride in mountain football up here. And, and what kind of Asheville is just, it's the crown jewel of the mountains. It's what it should be. When you pull up at our school, it doesn't look like any other school you've ever been to. Yep. And so, and I remember, being up here in the mountains and like going down to a Crest, and they are just incredibly talented down there. I just like the way mountain football is played. It's tougher. It's grittier. That's how we approach it. That's how the kids approach it. And we hope to get home games in the playoffs, and we hope they're cold. That's right. What we want out of this thing. And that's what we tell our kids, that we want to make sure we play well enough so we can get home playoff games, and we pray that it's 20 degrees and sleeting, because that's where we want to be. And that's not where they want to be. And so that's kind of the differences in the 3 places. All 3 have been great, and I love it up here at Asheville. I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I got a lot. I feel older than I am. I got a lot of years left in this thing. So I love it here. My family loves it here, and it's a good situation. With, like I said, I got a good group of kids this year, and I'm gonna have the same group of kids for a while.
Yeah, that's a good situation to be in, Coach Radford. I was going to bring it up. I had about a week or 2 ago, we had one of your rival guys, Coach Shane Laws, on the show. And I was talking about kind of the resurgence, and I feel a little bit of a resurgence in Asheville football kind of taking place. I know that you guys are really talented. Again, I know you're young, but I know you guys got a lot of talent. AC being what they are, Irwin's kind of been on this resurgence. Coach Pruitt does a great job up there. You know, they've been making a lot of noise. You know, I think Inca's going to be a lot better this year. You know, I just think the quality of football all around in the city of Asheville and in Buncombe County, for the most part, is really up. And I feel like that's a good thing for the talent and for the area, because I feel like a few years ago, you know, you could have made the conversation that Reynolds or somebody like that just kind of sucked the air out of the city because of how good they were. But I feel like from a competitive standpoint, you guys are in a really good place right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a competitive conference. You know, it is. You know, and yeah, Irwin won the conference last year. Now with the way the hurricane all changed things, we didn't get a chance to play Irwin in conference play. You know, so I guess they beat Reynolds, and so but we ended up winning the 4A portion of it after beating TC and McDowell. You know, and the Reynolds game was a hard loss for us last year. I mean, we get up on them, they kick a field goal there at the end, like 42-yard field goal, and the kid nails it at the end of the game. So, but it's what a rivalry game should be. You know, you hate when you end up on the losing end of it, but that's how it should be. You know, and so, and you mentioned some really good Coach Laws, Coach Pruitt, Mike Sexton, who I worked under when I was at Irwin. I worked under Coach Sexton and Coach Pruitt early in my career when I was at Irwin. And they're fantastic football coaches. They're fantastic football coaches, and they really maximize what they have. And like I said, I think mountain football is definitely in a good place right now.
All right. Andy, any questions? Anything for Coach?
Well, Coach, I mean, you know, you're talking about, and I want to get back to your team, because I think the kids are most important. And,
yes.
You know, how young, and, you know, you said you're going to be starting 4 freshmen on defense. I would assume, and I hate assuming, but, you know, I would assume that, you know, the offense is going to take precedence over the defense. I know you got to have defense to win championships, but, you know, with that being said, which side of the ball for you right now is ahead? You know, usually this time of the season, defense is always ahead of offense. But, you know, you spoke about the youngness of your defensive line and, defense. Is that where your club is, or what?
We really need this scrimmage tomorrow. This scrimmage has got to show us a lot of things tomorrow. You know, it's tough when you're going against each other for 8 straight days. And to be honest with you, offense has won some days, defense has won some days. Those young dudes over there can play, you know, and it's not like we're old on offense. I mean, we got 2 senior offensive linemen, a senior tight end, you know, we got a sophomore quarterback, a sophomore running back, a junior, you know, we're not old anywhere. You know, and the sophomore quarterback is going to be a ball player. Tay Williams, ball player, incredibly smart young man. You have to tell him one time, you know. And I work primarily with the offense. You know, Coach Cheek is our offensive coordinator, and he calls it. You know, but I work with the quarterback, and I tell him he has to be me on the field. That's the expectation. You know, is he's the head coach on the field. He's got to know it how I feel I know it. You know, he's got to be able to call it a safety blitz. He's got to be able to hold the count and point out the outside backer that's blitzing and make sure he's you know, protected on pass stuff. And so that's what's expected of him. And that's a lot to throw at a sophomore. And he has done an incredible job with it so far. Now, when live bullets are coming tomorrow, could things change? Sure. You know, but and I expect there to be growing pains. But for me to say the offense is ahead or defense is ahead, you know, we've been split in fall camp so far. We need tomorrow, because Brevard's good.
Real good.
You know, they're gonna show us exactly what we need to know tomorrow in our scrimmage as far as our deficiencies. And like you alluded to earlier, Chris, they kind of changed the schedule the past couple of years, and I'm a fan of it. I mean, there was a time period where we would have started practice this Monday, and we'd have scrimmaged next Wednesday and next Friday, and then played. And that's hard. That was hard. This setup that we have, we've had enough practice in. We get a scrimmage Friday. We get to go evaluate it. We get to evaluate kids. Every kid we have that's eligible to play, that's made all their days, is going to play tomorrow. You know, and we need to see them. We need to evaluate them. And then we get a whole nother week of preparation for Pisgah and the Buncombe County Jamboree, which we kind of modeled after the Cleveland County Jamboree. When I got up here to Asheville, you know, I was like, hey, the Cleveland County Jamboree is awesome. Yeah, let's see what we can do to kind of mimic it. And that's what we've done. This is year 4 of it actually up here. So, you know, but we have a whole other week of practice and then another scrimmage to kind of see if we've progressed, you know, and then we get to play. And so the way it's kind of set up, I appreciate that. I think it allows teams to get better. You always say the most growth happens, you know, in a season between week 1 and week 2. And I think with the way this season, the preseason set up, it allows for that growth to happen earlier. And there's a lot of growing that's going to happen, but we need to see it, and I think tomorrow is going to be a big indication of that.
All right, man. That's exciting. Again, just the fact that we've got some real football tomorrow. And I say real football, people have been talking about 7-on-7s all year, and I know that's important to some people, but to me, it's not real football. So I'm happy to see some pad thumping, hitting going on and just see some real football. One thing I wanted to ask you, in the old days, you talk about the health of a program, the numbers, participation, programs wanted to have about 100 kids. So, you had a full JV, a varsity team, you was able to kind of always, coaches wanted to kind of keep things around that 100. Where do you guys stand up there in Asheville in regards to how many kids you've got in your program? And also a second part of my question is how much of an emphasis with your coaching staff? And I know you got a great staff. You identified some guys to me like Coach Cardillo and Coach Cheek, and that I know they're coordinating your offense and defense and doing a lot of things. Do you put in having a full staff and trying to run the JV program the same style that you do your Friday night guys?
Yeah. Well, to start off with numbers wise, it's been consistent. The hard part was when I first took this job, about a week later, we all went home for COVID. So I didn't necessarily take the job in the most ideal time, and that was a whole different element, but our numbers have stayed consistent. The one thing I think that was very hard on these kids with the hurricane last year is when we came back, JV season was over. We all banged JV up here. And a lot of people sent their JV home. I didn't send any of my kids home. I said, hey, keep coming to practice. I got 60 jerseys for Friday night. I'll dress 60. You can make kind of like college, making the travel squad type deal. But I wanted to keep coming to practice. Now, that's all good and well in theory. But after a while, those kids that are coming up and, if they're just practicing, then they're like, well, coach, I think I'm ready to go to wrestling or basketball. I get that. And so we see a small decline in our numbers this year, but it's whether we start with 100 or we start with 80, we finish with 75. We're a 75 program. That's what we are. We're normally, 40 on varsity, 35 on JV. This year, with having so many young guys up, we're more of a, 45-30 split, but we're a 75 program. We have been for the last 6 years since I've been here. I know the year before I took the job, they actually had to cancel the JV program for lack of players. It's the scary thing with our program right now is when you pull so many young kids up, the JV team, that's a lot of kids that didn't play a lot in middle school, and it's going to be great for them because they're going to get to play. They're not going to sit there and watch. They're going to get to play. My staff does such a good job. I'm so lucky, and I know that my staff at some point are going to leave and to be head coaches, and they should. And it's going to be a great thing. Yeah, I'm probably going to coach against a lot of them, and those will be fun, heated games, with coaching the JV, we run everything the same. Our JV defense is the same thing our varsity runs. Now, it's not as complex, it's the baby steps of it. Our JV offense is trying its best right now to emulate what we're trying to do on varsity. Again, it is the bones of it, is the start, but you got to start it there, at the end of the day, it's two different teams. All right. And you got to do what your personnel allows you to do. So there's different stuff that JV and the varsity is going to have to do to be able to get balls to playmakers, on offensive side. And you got to do some different things, but the core is the same. The coaches coach the same position, varsity and JV. And so that way, when a coach says this kid's ready to come up, I know it's right. It's not a difference. It's not a JV coach telling me, hey, this kid's ready to come up, and he doesn't coach the varsity kids either. So when the varsity linebacker coach tells me he's got a JV kid that's ready to come, I know he's telling the truth and he's ready.
Yeah, and I'm kind of piggyback on that. What Chris kind of said, Coach, we can only play 11 at one time, so can they. But when I was coaching, we'd always, and I don't know how fortunate you are or with this or not up there, but we always clinicked our middle school coaches. So even our middle school, especially at Sun Valley, they ran some of our offense. So by the time they got 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, when we were running inside zone or outside zone, they knew the play call. They knew it. Do you have anything like that set up for your,
Yeah, so we're I mean, I'm incredibly lucky in this case. I got Scott Buchanan as the head middle school coach, and he's a varsity coach, and I've tried to bring him up with me for the past couple of years. Like, hey man, you're doing me an incredible service at the middle school. But it's hard to hire coaches right now. And
Yeah.
I mean, I lost 2 coaches last year. I lost, Daryl Clark became the head coach at McDowell, and I'm just so thrilled for him. And he took one of my really, really good young assistants with him. And I couldn't replace those 2 guys. We didn't have jobs, didn't have stuff available to be able to do that. We just had to make it work and switch some coaching staff around. But going back to middle school, you got Scott Buchanan and Mike Zibioski who run the offense and defense down there. And those guys have both spent time at the Asheville High varsity staff back in the day. I mean, they treat it like a varsity program. And they run similar type stuff as we do. And so when the kids come up, they kind of, they know what's expected, and they know they've been in a varsity program already for 2 years, even though it was 7th and 8th grade. I mean, over the summer, and I'm on the same boat as you guys with 7-on-7. I'm not a fan of it, but I do it, but they take our kids down to Shelby and Crest and 7-on-7 them over the summer, and with middle school, and that doesn't happen a lot, especially up here. And I think that shows you why I got some young kids that are ready to play right now in varsity.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I was kind of, alluding to that, because I think that's important for programs, not just Asheville or wherever I was coaching, but I think if the middle school can be involved, and I'm speaking to, everybody, because I think if you can incorporate the middle school, it just makes your job easier as they get older, and and understanding the play calls and stuff like that too. So I really think it's important, because then it feels like it's the whole program. It's not just JV varsity at Asheville High School or at said school. It's, our 6th grade team, our 7th grade team, our 8th grade team, our JV team, our varsity team. We're all running a very similar offense, or defense, whatever it may be. Now, I do want to ask this. As far as, there's always 3 phases to every game. Special teams, offense, and defense. And I always told my coaches, special teams is going to win or lose you at least 2 ball games a year. What is your thoughts on that?
I think, and I was a special teams coordinator last year. Since I've now given it to Coach Rudisill, Kobe Rudisill, who does a fantastic job with it. My whole thing with special teams, they're all momentum plays, and momentum is so. I mean, you can't sit here and define momentum in a game. But everyone in the stadium can feel it. And so knowing that special teams is made up of nothing but momentum plays, positive or negative, if you don't spend time on it, then you're going to have more negative. And when momentum starts rolling and you're sitting there and you can take as many timeouts as you want to take, it is tough to stop momentum. So we've worked hard already on this, and we've done a good job. Coach Kobe's done a good job with drill work, with kickoff, not just running the kickoff team out there, but doing, specific drill work with, because our two focuses right now are kickoff and punt, because that's how you get beat. If you're not good on kickoff, you're not good on punt. That's how you get beat. So that's kind of been our 2 main focus points right now. Now, the good thing with the Jamboree next week is we do special teams live. And I like doing that just because it forces us to get ready. It forces us to have them in, whether they look good or not. It forces us to have a 2 deep depth chart at them, and it forces our hand in practice to make sure that we're not neglecting that part. Because like you said, if you neglect it, you're going to get beat by it.
Yep.
I couldn't agree more. Coach Radford, I think we'll let you go here in a second. I appreciate your time. Coach Rodden, Andy, you got anything final for Coach?
Coach Radford, I just want to tell you thank you for coming on with us, and I wish you best of luck, and I'll be stopping in because I'm going to be making some trips up the mountain because like I said earlier, a piece of my heart's going to be up there for the next 4. So I definitely want to stop by and see you, and if nothing else, take you out for lunch. And if there's anything that your community needs, please let me know. I really have a heart, for that. I get emotional thinking about it just because it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. And, people lost everything. So, I just want you to know that my heart goes out to you, your team, your community, and best of luck this year. And I'll be seeing you soon.
Hey, Asheville is 45 minutes from Colby, easy
That's
little
right.
stop, and Little Pig's right across the street.
There you go.
We got it made.
Well,
all right.
I need to come as well. So when Andy comes, I'll find a time to come with you. And we'll drag that guy Paul Graham that works out there. We'll have to school with you too.
Paul
we'll have him come with us.
Paul is great. Yeah, he's coming too. He's coming too.
Absolutely. Coach, I appreciate you carving time out. I know you could be home with the family, and I hope you'll get there soon. But to sit here and talk some football with Andy and I, and kind of just preview your football team, and again, I know that football is, it's just an extracurricular, but it's so much part of the fabric of the communities, and people, and especially given everything that happened in Nashville in the Western North Carolina last year, I think that people are really looking forward to this fall, and I hope it's a good season, not just for you and your school, but just that entire Western North Carolina community. I think this is going to be a great year for everybody.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. I really do.
All right, Coach. Well, hey, thanks for joining Andy and I. We're going to let you go, but best of luck this year. If we can ever do anything to promote you and your program, by all means, give us a call, and we'll get you on anytime. And we'll bring some of your kids on here too. And once you guys have some of those big games, we'll let them kind of be the stars of the show.
That sounds good. That's who it is, anyways. They're the stars.
And I want to consider that Dobbins Bennett game. You got me intrigued now.
You need to look it up. It's
now, where is that at, if you don't mind me asking?
Kingsport.
Okay.
So it's not a bad drive, and it's unbelievable.
Now, will that take a little longer because of 40 being?
No, I think we're fine.
I think it's
now.
Yeah. It should be all right.
I think we're fine now. I hope.
Yeah.
All right, Coach Radford. Hey, appreciate you. We'll be in touch. We're going to let you go, but thanks for coming on tonight.
All right, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, Coach Rodden. Hey, that was great. Coach Cort Radford, Asheville High School. I do agree. I think I know they're young, but I think, like Coach said, they're really talented, and I think they're going to have a good year.
I agree. I think Cort does a great job. He's done a great job everywhere he's been, and I think the world of Coach Radford and what he's done at all his stops. From the time at Crest being DC to what he did at Chase, and and even now what he's doing up there. And I mean, think about that as a head coach. I mean, you went in, you were hired, and within the first month or so, you get shut down for COVID, and then you have to deal with that. The hurricane. 3 years later or 2 years later, whatever it was. I mean, that's a lot on the soul. On the am I in it for the right reason? You know what I mean? Like, so for him to continue to push through that's just kudos to him.
No kidding. Are you going to a jamboree tomorrow?
Well, I'm gonna try to, but I'm gonna be packing a car for my daughter.
You want to go to Shelby? Let me know.
I will. I definitely will. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one short. We had a great show, but I appreciate, as always, everything you do for us here at Carolina Preps, Andy, and thank you for lending your football knowledge.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
All right, guys. For Andy, for Coach Cort Radford, I'm Chris Hughes, Carolina Preps Inside the Headset. Get on the website, check us out, tell your friends. But thanks for all the support, and guys, we'll catch y'all next week.